Alright, Hey Adventures. Today is going to be our wrap-up for the month of May. So we'll get right into it. You want to go first?
Yeah. I read 9 books this month, which is a good reading month for me. Let's see. I started with A Swiftly Tilting Planet, which is book 3 in the Time Quartet by Madeleine L'Engle. I can't remember which one this was about. I do remember that after reading the 3rd book, I wasn't interested in picking up the last story. They're losing my interest. I enjoyed A Wrinkle in Time. I did like the 2nd book. The 3rd book, yeah. It was the 3rd book I really didn't love. I feel like they're just getting more and more mediocre. So, but I did really like A Wrinkle in Time is such a good story. It's a really good story.
Yeah. Can I have that book as well?
Oh, okay. I suppose.
So the first book that I read in the month, or finished in the month of May, was A Wind in the Door, which is book 2 of the Time Quartet.
I love that neither of us knew we were reading this.
I don't know why I picked this one up. I think I just needed an audiobook.
Yep.
And it was
They're
available
always
or something like
available,
that.
yep.
And so I was like, hey, this is perfect. I need to read this. So, yeah, I picked it up and I read it. And I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think I'm the same way. It wasn't quite as good as A Wrinkle in Time, but it was also a very different story that was trying to be told. A lot of really scientific and just some weird tropes that are played with it in it, and I don't mind them. It's just not necessarily my favorite, or else I'm not used to them, I guess. So, anyways, enjoyable enough.
Okay, next, I read Fail State Legends by John Oddie. I really, really liked this. Fail State is written, I don't know that this is exactly book 2 because I'm not sure how the chronology works, and there's some short story / ebook exclusives that I think would fit between us. So I think it goes Fail State Gauntlet, which is a short story, and then Fail State Legends, to my understanding. It's a little bit confusing. So this would be book 2, kind of 3. It worked really well as book 2, if that makes sense. It felt like I picked up where I left off. I really appreciate the superheroes and the fact that there's Christian themes and Christian characters mixed in with superheroes, which is not something you see because most people just ignore religion in regards to superheroes unless they're making superheroes their religion because it's a difficult topic. And I really like that John Oddie addressed that. I love his characters. I love that the dilemmas they're placed in feel so real and so natural. And yes, they're trying to save the world, but they're also just trying to do the right thing. And while that's like the most basic theme ever, it really works well in here. I do remember reading this and seeing that basic theme and then finding an underlying theme tied in too, which I really, really liked. The themes were really great. It was a really well told story, just a fun story. If you like superheroes, if you like Christian fiction, I'd really recommend this.
So the second book that I finished in the month of May was Gawain by J.P. Harker. This is a Arthurian retelling, basically a lot of setup for a series of stories of Arthurian retellings. This one specifically is about Gawain, hence the title, and it's his take on the Green Knight tale, which, I'll get more into this when I actually get to my review. I loved the aspect of the Green Knight's tale that was in this one. It worked so well in the retelling. It was very much different, but at the same time it fits so well with the story that he was telling, and I really liked it. So yes, I read Gawain by J.P. Harker. This one was actually sent to us by the author, and I should have gotten to it a long time ago, but I didn't. But then when I did finally get to it, I enjoyed it quite a bit. There were some things that I didn't love so much about it, but I'll get into more of that when I get into the review. But overall, I just really enjoyed this book.
Okay, the next book I read was By the Pricking of My Thumbs by Agatha Christie. This is my 3rd Agatha Christie book I've read, and it's a Tommy and Tuppence mystery. I think I've read a Poirot, I've read Standalone, not any of her specific detectives that she follows, and then I've read Tommy and Tuppence. Standalone I read was And Then There Were None, which was by far the best mystery book I've ever read. It was fantastic, nothing can beat it. But in comparison to the Hercule Poirot, I loved Tommy and Tuppence. I loved the husband and wife dynamic and how they worked together through their problems. One thing I really noticed about this book, I didn't love it. I liked aspects of it, but overall the story wasn't something that I really related to. What I loved noticing about this is as I read, I saw a situation in the story that I've also seen in a horror novel that I've read. And it was the coolest thing because the way that it was portrayed in a mystery book in the time period, actually the time period mirrored pretty well for the horror book. Okay, maybe that's not fair to say. It was like 50 years. But I feel like that's not that big of a gap in the expanse of the world's timeline. Anyhow, they were so different. The way that the author told the story was so different. Like in the horror, of course, it was horrifying. In the book, it was terrible, but it was also like intriguing. And it was a mystery. Like it just felt mystery. And it was so cool that authors can write the same or almost identical situations in such different ways. That really surprised me, and I got to enjoy observing that as I read by the pricking of my thumbs.
So the third book that I read was Within the Sanctuary of Wings. This is book 5 of the Lady Trent memoirs by Marie Brennan. So now I've finished the series. I don't know if I don't think I've done a review for this one yet. No, I haven't, because I'm still in April for reviews. But I really enjoyed this book. Is a great ending to this series. There's things that I could pick out that I wish were a little bit different or whatever in this series, but overall it's just super fun series that was really enjoyable. So that's all I'm going to get into, because I'll get into more of my thoughts when I do my review.
Okay, the next book I read, putting that one down because I have one that I don't own a hard copy of. So the next book I read was The Summer of Broken Rules by Meredith Fox. One of the Bookstagram accounts that I follow recommended this. She likes romance, and I'm not opposed to romance, and she said she really liked how clean it was and how like feel good the story was. I read it, and it just kind of bored me, honestly. And like I don't know, like I do like romance sometimes, and it was clean, and I really appreciated that aspect of it because I don't want to read smut, but it didn't work for me. Like, sure, it was feel good if you're, like, shallow. Which I'm not saying that person is. Maybe that's just the type of thing that is a feel-good book for her. But, anyhow, wasn't the book for me. So, go ahead.
The next one, and there will be 4 that you'll see very similar things about as I continue through this, but the one that I'm currently on, where's it at? No. Is The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. This is the first book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series. I've read this in the past. I randomly decided to jump in and reread these because I saw that Captured in Words was doing a read-along for it, and I was like, I don't really care if I reread these right now, but I hit placed a hold on the audiobook for this first one, and then it arrived, and so I was like, oh, might as well read it. And then I read it, and then I really enjoyed it, so yeah. So that was the next book that I read.
We're both making a return to middle grade this month.
We are.
did in May. You'll have to see what books I read. I also read Forgotten Tales by Edgar Allan Poe, which is a collection of short stories by him. I liked some of them. I do like Edgar Allan Poe's style, and yes, he's very dark, but the types of things he brings up are very thought-provoking. There was one story, I read it to the end, and I was like, what just happened? That's the most disturbing thing ever, and not in like a Poe style disturbing. It was just like wrong, like just messed up. And then like there was a paragraph which was almost like a disclaimer at the end of the story which explained things and made it okay, and I'm like, no, that was just messed up. It was The Spectacles, the short story by Edgar Allan Poe. I just thought that was really, really strange, and I do get what he was trying to say in the story he was telling, but it was just weird. It was just weird. Moving on.
Alright, the next one that I read was The Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan. This is book 2 in the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, and much like The Lightning Thief, this one I actually didn't have to put a hold on. It was just available as soon as I wanted it. So I finished The Lightning Thief, and I was like, well, I could either go back and read my Dumas, which I'm enjoying, or I could read another short middle grade, and so I read the next short middle grade and enjoyed it a lot. So that's Sea of Monsters.
I also read The Great Halifax Explosion by John U. Bacon in the month of May. This is a nonfiction. I don't read a lot of nonfictions, but I had this one and it really intrigued me. what I loved about this story is the way the author told it by, yes, he told us about the Great Halifax explosion, but he told us how greatly that affected Halifax by explaining their past and tying it in. He also tied in like their relationship with countries, like before, this was and during World War One, and at the time the US hadn't entered the war yet, and Canada in a lot of senses was very angry at the US for not helping them, for not aiding in that war. And after this Halifax explosion, their perspective on the US changed a little bit. And so just seeing how everything tied together, also it's just living in the Northwest United States, it's not something from history that we hear about. I think I talked to someone who used to live on the East Coast, and they said that yes, they'd heard of it, but everyone who's grown up on this side of the US, it's pretty much foreign to them. So it was a fantastic story. They also dived into characters of people who lived during the time and those who survived, what they lost, what the aftermath looked like. It was just it covered everything you could really want to know. It also talked about the Titanic a little bit, which is one of my favorite historical accounts to read about. So that was kind of interesting.
So the next one that I read this month was The Titan's Curse by Rick Riordan. This is book 3 of the Percy Jackson the Olympian series. I, again, really enjoyed this one. Eventually I will go through, once I get to it, I will do a analysis of the entire series and a little bit of my thoughts on the entire series after, or as a read through, and since I've actually started a channel now, since the last time I read it, kind of rambling here. But anyways, I enjoyed this one quite a bit. There was lots of things in it that were, again, it's very similar, very formulaic to the first two, where they go on an adventure and they hit this obstacle and then they overcome it, and they hit the next obstacle and they overcome it, and it's just very episodic in that way. But that doesn't mean it's not enjoyable, and it's just the use of Greek mythology and the incorporation of it into modern day world is really what gives it its charm.
Yeah. I read The Enchantress Returns, which is book 2 in the Land of Stories series by Chris Colfer. Yes, by Chris Colfer. This is a middle grade, and I'm really liking The Land of Stories. I have found that I would have enjoyed this so much more a little bit younger. I wish I would have read this as a kid because they would have probably been some of my favorite stories. I love aspects about them, but the middle, like, that it's written for a younger audience really screamed at me as I'm listening, because I listened to the audiobook, as I'm listening, like, okay, if this was intended for adult audience, it would be written a little bit different and I would appreciate it more. So that aspect is there. I wasn't sure how I felt about this book until the end. It was kind of just pittering along. There was things about it I liked. It makes me laugh a couple times, which is amazing. And then, the ending surprised me so much. I wasn't expecting them to take the turn that it did. It really shocked me and is not something, I don't know how I feel about it. It was very shocking, and I did cry. I almost cried. I was listening to the audiobook, and it's not very normal that I cry in audiobooks, but I almost did with this one because it was very emotional. But I really love how the stories, Brother Grimm's fairy tale stories, are tied into a world and how that's built and how the characters interact with each other and their real stories. It's pretty fun.
And then the next book that I read is, can you guess it? Mm-hmm. This is book 4 of Percy Jackson the Olympian series by Rick Riordan, The Battle of the Labyrinth. This one is where they really kind of go off in a different direction from the first 3 stories, anyways, however that works. And it follows a different formula, and their labyrinths are cool. And actually the whole Daedalus story from Greek mythology is one of the ones that I've really loved learning about, and the whole Daedalus and Icarus building wings and trying to fly away, but then Icarus flies too close to the sun and his wings melt. That whole story, for some reason, it really resonates with me, and I really like that story. So seeing it play out, or the way that it plays out and ties into the Battle of the Labyrinth, is super cool to me. So yeah, book 4.
I also read Maxine Justice, Galactic Attorney by Daniel Schwabauer. There was a couple things about this book I really liked. The way that Daniel Schwabauer shows AIs, which I realize he also does in his Operation Grendel, but they're different. I really like how AIs how their characters and personalities were in this story. He did something that branched out a little bit from like what a definition of an AI was, and I actually really liked it. Also, the theme in this book and how the resolution and the story all turned around at the end was really incredible. That being said, I didn't love the first chapter. I felt like it was overly, I don't even know how to put it. There was a lot of words that didn't need to be in the first chapter. Like flowery isn't quite the right description. There was just a lot in the first chapter. So, I read the first, I think maybe the first 2, and I was like, I'm not sure about this book. And by the time I was halfway through, I was hooked. So, I would recommend if you're interested in trying this, because it's such an amazing premise, give it a chance past the first 2 chapters.
And looks like the last book that I read in the month of May was not Percy Jackson and the Olympians book 5. It was actually Sitka by Louis L'Amour. So this, I've read several Louis L'Amours in my life. I haven't read all of them. It's probably about 10 that I've read. And I really enjoy it. There's been a couple that I haven't enjoyed as much, but overall I really enjoy all the books that I've read of his. And what I realized, because it's been 3-4 years since I last read a L'Amour, and what I noticed this time reading another book by him is just how technically good of a writer he is. He's not very flowery or purple writer. He's very concise and precise in his language, but at that same time, it's so immersive. You feel like you're in that setting. You can see the setting that's being described, but it's not a ton of description. It works so well. His stories are incredible. This one I read specifically because it's titled Sitka, which is in Alaska, and so I wanted to read a book about Alaska, essentially, a story set in Alaska. And there was some of that. I'll get more into it in my review when I finally get to that, and it's a ways away. But I really enjoyed Sitka, and that's the last book that I read in the month of May.
I also read Calculated by Nova McBee, or I listened to it on audiobook, so I don't have it. I had some mixed feelings about this. I didn't like it until I got about halfway through the book, and then everything changed and I started liking it. Also, listening to it on audiobook, having a past and present like switch flashback type of thing in the story where it's consistently, okay, you're in the past, okay, now you're in the present. It's hard to follow an audiobook because I tend to skim over things like chapter titles or setting information, which is really important, or I just don't hear that stuff because I want the story. So that was a little confusing. I didn't like the book until halfway through, and then I did like it, but I don't have any really strong feelings about this book. I am interested in reading more though, so that says something.
That's very much where I was at when I read Calculated. I enjoyed it enough. There was lots of things about it that I enjoyed, but it was more of what it was setting up for that I enjoyed the most. I was looking forward to.
And then the last book I read is I Must Betray You by Ruta Sepetys. I read this in 2 days. It was great. I've been dying to read this because I love Ruta Sepetys. It was good. It's not my favorite of her works, but once again, she's shedding light on a historical account that is undermined, something you don't learn or hear much about. It's also more modern. It's set in the late 1980s. So I love when history, you can think back, you're like, okay, that was barely 40 years ago. It's pretty cool that my math is right.
Yeah, if you said the 80s.
1980s.
Yeah. Should I leave it in?
You can if you want.
Yeah, I think I will.
Thank you all for watching an Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday.
We have our social medias linked in the description down below. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. We will see you guys again soon.
Stay warm.